Hello everyone, my name is Josie. Welcome back to Josie Violet Knits. This is a knitting podcast where I talk about all things knitting. I am a relatively new knitter. I started knitting in January of this year, so I'm kind of sharing my journey with knitting here on YouTube. And today we have a regular podcast episode. It's been a little while since I filmed just a sit down, here are all my finished objects, because I have just not had a finished object for so long. I feel like a lot of the projects I've been knitting lately have been quite intense and quite detailed, as you can probably tell from the one I'm currently wearing. So yes, we will get into all the details about my Rosie sweater, which I'm guessing you're probably here for. I also have one other finished object, and then we'll go through some of my whips and a few acquisitions and things like that. But let's get into the Rosie sweater because I know that that's what you're here for. So this is my finished Rosie sweater. I'm so happy with it. I started this in the beginning of September and I finished it kind of a week into November, so it took me just over a month to finish, which I feel like is pretty good going. This is knit on 4.5 and 4mm needles. I decided to, in the pattern it kind of gives you the option if you want to go up a needle size for the colourwork section, and I did do that because I just wanted to make sure that the colourwork wasn't going to be bunching or anything, and I think it worked out really well. I have seen no issues with bunching or anything. So it's 4mm on the regular stockinette, and then it was 4.5 for the roses. And then for the ribbing, I did also go down to 3.5mm, which is all what was recommended in the pattern, and that seemed to work out quite well for me. So for this, I stuck pretty closely to the recommended yarn. I used Tin Peer Gint, held with the Sadness Garn Tin Silk Mohair, and I was really happy with how the roses turned out. For the white section, the mohair that I used was called Print. I think it's a new type of mohair that Sadness Garn are doing. This mohair is really beautiful. It has shades of pink, yellow, brown all in it, and that was what I held with the white to create. Ooh, I'm spilling things everywhere. And that was what I held with my white to create this really beautiful rose pattern. I'm not sure exactly how much it shows up on camera, but in real life, it's just such a beautiful, it's quite a subtle colour variation that I just feel like makes it look a little bit more interesting than just a plain white. And with this, I did also switch. So the original design has kind of a creamy white as the main colour, and then it has the brown as the contrast colour. But I decided to swap that, and I'm really happy that I did, because I feel like this now feels quite like autumnal, and also I just always get makeup on things and I always spill things on my clothes, so for me having a darker colour sweater is just a bit more practical. Also my dog is brown, so I just wanted to do a brown sweater because then the dog hairs won't show off as much, but I'm really happy with the choices I made with the colours and I'm absolutely loving it. It is a tiny bit damp still. I actually just took this off the blocking mats, so yeah, I'm sitting here in a slightly damp sweater, but this is just the kind of things that you have to do as a knitter because I wanted to film this video today. So review of this yarn, I know that a few people have asked me what I think about this mohair, and I do have to say it is slightly itchy. This is the only issue that I have with this sweater is the yarn, that I would say the mohair is a bit itchy. And I've used other mohair before. I've used Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair, and that is what it says on the tin. It's very soft, so I haven't really branched out too much with loads of different types of mohair. This is the first mohair I've used that I would definitely say yes, it is a bit itchy. I think for some people it would be too much. For some reason I can tolerate quite a lot of itchiness, so I'm currently just wearing this with a t-shirt underneath, and it is directly touching my arms and it is a bit itchy. It doesn't actually bother me too much. I don't know why, but I can feel that it is itchy, but I can somehow tolerate that. But if you're the kind of person that doesn't do well with itchiness, I would probably stay away from this mohair, unfortunately. The strands of this mohair are very long. It's a very hairy mohair. So I think that has something to do with the itch factor. Some of the other mohairs that I've used don't look as hairy. Even though it's itchy, it still is really soft as well. It's kind of a weird combination of itchy and soft, so I still find it very cozy. But yeah, definitely if you have any issues with itch, I'd probably stay away from this mohair. In terms of modifications to this jumper, I did make a few. You might notice that the collar is a little bit shorter than the original pattern says. I believe I did it 2 centimeters shorter than the pattern suggests. I think it was kind of ended up being about 1.5 centimeters shorter. And for me, I just have this weird thing where I feel like if a jumper goes like this, especially if I'm on a Zoom call, it looks like I have no neck and it feels like my head is just floating out in space. So I just need a tiny bit of my neck to be showing. Otherwise it's just like chin city. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? So for me, I just wanted it to be here. And this is literally, it's turned out perfectly. I'm so happy it's lying completely flat. There is no like bunching or flopping over or anything. It's honestly just like perfectly flat. So if you're the kind of person that doesn't really love a roll neck, because I was a bit concerned, this is the one thing was actually putting me off knitting this pattern for a little while, was the neckline. And I, at one point, I think last video I was talking about potentially rolling it down, but I decided not to do that just because I don't know, I like it to be slightly high. I feel like it's part of the design, part of the 80s feel. So I kind of wanted to kind of honour that part of the design, but at the same time, I didn't want to have it like so high that I feel like I'm being choked. So I feel like this was the perfect compromise. I did also make sure to do the tubular bind off, not because sometimes I just skip the tubular part of the tubular bind off and I just do the Italian bind off like without doing the setup rows. But for this neckline, I felt like I needed it to be quite solid. So I made sure to do the tubular bind off for this neckline. I think that has helped. It feels quite solid and secure. And I think that's what's kind of cinching it in a bit more and making it seem a bit more like solid as a neckline. So I'm very happy with how that went. The other modification I made was making the sleeve slightly longer. Now I don't know if I just have like abnormally long arms. I think I do. Like my fingers ends like halfway down my thigh. I don't know if that's weird, but I just feel like proportionally compared to most people, I have quite long arms. So a lot of time when I'm buying things in the shop, jumpers and tops and things just don't fit my arms, or they're always like here, and I just hate how that looks. So I did make this a little bit longer. I actually did an extra repeat and an extra decrease as well, because I also really need my sleeves to be cinched in a bit more so that I can roll them up, because I wear my jumpers around the house. I wear them when I'm doing the washing up and things, and big baggy sleeves really annoy me. So I did an extra decrease. I did an extra amount. I think it was an extra 14 rows, and then I also added an extra 7 rows, something like that. So it was quite a decent amount more in terms of length. And then when I'd finished it, it didn't even look that long. In fact, I was a bit worried that it was going to be too short, but now that I've blocked it, it is perfection. I'm so happy with the sleeve length. This for me is perfect. It covers my ugly Apple Watch, and it's kind of enough that I can kind of cover my hands if I'm cold when I'm walking, but it's not so long that it's like drowning my hand. So this for me is like the perfect length. One other thing I did do, I don't even know if this counts as a modification, but I just made the bottom ribbing a little bit longer as well. I definitely usually knit my sweaters quite cropped because I do wear a lot of high-waisted things, but I've been noticing lately I've been kind of enjoying more sort of mid-range jeans. I think it's kind of the way the styles are going. I mean, I'm not going full on low rise like 90s style, but I've just recently bought the new pair of jeans that are mid rise, and I kind of like that. So I think from now on I'm going to try and avoid very, very cropped jumpers, because it does just kind of stop me being able to wear them in with certain outfits. Whereas if I just go that extra couple of centimeters, or extra 3 or 4 centimeters, it just means that the clothing is a lot more wearable in a lot more different contexts, and I don't just have to wear it with my high-rise trousers. In terms of the pattern, I know that I've definitely seen some people comment to say that the pattern is a little bit confusing in parts, and I do think there are a few parts, especially those a part where it was talking about putting stitch markers on near the beginning, and that was a little bit confusing. I did have to stop and think, what is it actually saying? I think it might be a translation issue. I do feel like it was worded just a little bit confusingly in the English version. But I managed to figure it out, and then it ended up that the markers, I don't know if they were actually needed, because when I got to the end of my project, I just found these random stitch markers that I'd put where it had said to put them, and I don't know if I ever ended up needing them, but maybe I'm misremembering, I'm not sure. Apart from that, I found it quite straightforward. There are a lot of charts. You do have to kind of wade through all of the charts, and I just use my phone to look at my patterns and like mark the lines off, so that was a bit annoying to have to keep scrolling down. I don't know if there's a solution to that really, because there are different charts for different sizes, so you have to scroll down to get to your size, and then there's about 4 different charts. There's the front, the back, the sleeve, and then once you get to the second set of roses, there's just like one chart for that. So there's definitely a lot of charts, but if you can get your head around figuring out where those charts are, it's pretty straightforward. But apart from that, I found it relatively okay. I did have to draw a few lines into the chart to make it a bit easier for me to read where the repeat was. That wasn't super clear, but I just drew a little line onto the chart and it was fine after that. So yeah, there's a few tweaks that probably could be made to it to make it a little bit more clear. But overall, I found it like a pretty enjoyable experience. I absolutely loved the construction. It was so interesting and intriguing. You start off knitting at the back, you do increases, and then you kind of shape the front also with increases. Now this was quite a while ago when I knit this, so I don't remember exactly how it worked. And then I think, yeah, you join it together at the front, and then you're knitting in the round. So you go from flat to knitting in the round. You actually pick up on the edge of the shoulder. So it's a drop shoulder, but you pick up along the edge of, where is it here? This shoulder here. And then you basically, from then on, you're working in the round. You then start to do raglan increases. So this is kind of like a combination of drop shoulder and raglan. And the raglan increases continue into the colour work section, which I've never done before. I have only ever done colour work in a circular yoke where the increases are just built in as yarn overs into the chart, which I feel like is probably the simplest way of doing it, whereas this is more, you're incorporating raglan increases, so you have to make one left and make one right, and you have to follow the chart to make sure you're doing those make one lefts and rights in the correct colour for it to make sense within the rose pattern. So I think that maybe is a bit more advanced. Like that definitely, you have to pay attention. You have to make sure that you're incorporating the new stitch that you've added on each time, and like make sure you're following that bit of the chart and like lining it up. But it is kind of clear, like you can see the chart increasing as you go. So I found it okay. I didn't have to, there were a few times where I had to, just like I made a small mistake and I had to go back kind of a few stitches and like redo if I thought I was reading the wrong part of the chart or whatever. That definitely happened a few times as I was going, but it wasn't a big deal because I feel like you can figure out that you've gone wrong pretty quickly, because if you keep looking at the stitches underneath, then you can see, oh well, that I know that there was 3 stitches there, so I need to have this stitch lined up with this stitch. I don't know if this is all like obvious for people that have been doing colour work for a long time, but it was just things like that I had to kind of get my head around of like, how do we keep track of that? The other thing with this design is there are quite a lot of floats, especially at the top, the start and the end of the chart. As you can see, I think at one point there is the biggest one is 14 stitches across. Where is that? I think it's here. There's 14 stitches across, so that is a lot of floats. So you have to catch your floats multiple times. Luckily for me, I was holding my white yarn in my left hand and my brown yarn in my right hand. And for me, catching a white float is easier than catching a brown float, just the way that I catch floats. So I found that okay. I feel like I've really learned how to catch floats from doing this project, and I feel very comfortable with it now. Previously, when I've done colour work, I'm always like questioning if this is the right way to do it, and you know, I'm sure there's like a million ways to catch floats and everyone probably has their own different ways, but I've kind of solidified what my way of catching floats is now, so I don't feel intimidated by it. It's just another part of the knitting process, which I'm very happy with because it is a bit scary. People always talk about floats as if they're some like big scary thing, but I think if you just think of them as part of the knitting process, then they become less scary and they're just kind of, you can just go with the flow. So yeah, I am very, very happy with this one. I absolutely love it. Even though it's still damp, I'm going to be wearing this for the rest of the day. I have a little bit of this print mohair left, and I have a whole other ball of the mohair and the tin pigment in brown. I have this much of the white left, so I feel like I'm starting to collect quite a lot of scraps from all my various projects because I am very scared of yarn chicken, so I always make sure that I have enough yarn for my project most of the time. There's been a few times where that hasn't happened, but most of the time I have too much yarn left over. So if you have any suggestions for scrappy projects, let me know, because I feel like there's going to be a scrappy project coming at some point. I'm looking at my scrap box and it's starting to overflow slightly, so if any of you guys have good ideas for scrappy projects, let me know. So let's move on to my second finished object. Yes, I have two finished objects. Look at me. Can you guess what this is? I feel like most people probably can tell just from this what it is. This is a Musselburgh hat. I knit this for my husband for his birthday. He actually picked out this yarn when we went to Berlin in February. This is how long it's taken me to knit this hat. This yarn is the Isiger Alpaca 2, so it's quite thin, it's like a fingering weight, and I held it double for this Musselburgh. Mainly because I didn't want to be knitting a fingering weight hat for ages, because this actually took quite a long time, even though it was held double, so it would have taken even longer if it was knit in fingering. Now, I don't do gift knits that much, but I will say that my husband is very knit worthy because he can actually see the amount of time that it takes to knit something. He was there watching me knit it for multiple days and weeks, and because I was sort of just picking this up amongst other projects, so he definitely deserves it, and he has been wearing it a lot. He reported back that it is very, very warm, and I think it will be really good for the winter. It obviously doesn't fit me, it's too big because it's for him, but you get the idea. This is such an amazing design. I'm sure most of you watching has probably heard of this before. It's quite a popular pattern. It has like thousands and thousands of projects on Ravelry, and I can see why. It is such a smart design. It is completely flexible in terms of what yarn weight you use. You start off with a pinhole cast on, or otherwise known as disappearing loop, which is what I did. There are other like circular, like the belly button I-cord or something, I don't really know, but I just searched for a disappearing loop cast on and this is what came up, and I've never done that before, so that was really good to learn something new. It was quite fun. Like it took a second to figure out exactly what I was supposed to be doing, because it's a bit of a weird thing. It doesn't feel like you're actually doing anything, and then suddenly you just have like a circle. So I did that, and then you start doing increases, kind of like a raglan. You could just kind of increase out, and then it creates this little quite subtle pattern cross on the top. And then once you get to a certain point down the hat, then you measure what your gauge is, and then you figure out how much you need to keep increasing by. So it's a very, very smart idea. Basically, you can use any yarn that you want, which that is why this pattern is so popular. Everyone, like I was just saying, I've got so many bits of scrap lying around. I could make a million of these with all the different types of yarn that I have, and I wouldn't need to worry about what the weight of the yarn was, because you can just literally use anything. I think most people use a sort of finer gauge, like fingering, or I guess like a light DK would probably be quite nice. I think I used 3.5mm needles with it. So it's created quite a dense fabric, and at the start I was slightly concerned that it was a bit too dense, but I think now I've finished it and I've blocked it, it is pretty nice. Like, it's very warm. That's the thing. The design is basically just a tube. So once you've done the increases, you then just continue. And it looks a bit weird. And then once you get to the right length, and I was like constantly like, oh, surely I've done it long enough now, surely I've done it long enough now, but I kept measuring it and it just wasn't long enough, so it felt like it was taking ages. But just because you're not used to knitting such a long length of thing for a hat, but to be honest, it didn't take that long. I was just being impatient because I don't love gift knitting, because I'm a bit of a selfish knitter, and that's fine. But eventually I got to the point where I could start decreasing, and then you just pretty much do a similar thing. You then start decreasing in the same shape, so you have the same shape on both sides, and then you just kind of bind off at the end by sewing it together. And then, yeah, you have this tube, so then you fold it in on itself, so then it's double thickness, and then you just fold it up again for the brim, and then it makes it quadruple thickness around the ears. So that is why this is a very nice warm hat, and it kind of just makes it a bit flexible. Like, you can have the brim up a little bit higher if you want more of like a art director type beanie, or you can have it a bit lower if it's really, really cold and you just want it fully to like protect your ears and lower down onto your neck. So I really like that about it. And I also just like how simple it is, like, because of the way that it's constructed, it doesn't have any ribbing. It's just literally plain stockinette, really. The only sort of vague design element is the cross at the top. So that just makes it kind of the perfect simple beanie. I feel like it's completely unisex. It looks great on everyone. You just can't really go wrong. So I think if any of you are looking for a gift knit pattern and you have some spare yarn lying around, I would definitely recommend this. It is very, very simple, and as I say, quite flexible. Any yarn will do. I personally think maybe like a finer gauge is probably slightly better, just because 4 layers is a lot. So I think if you were doing, like, imagine if you did that on bulky yarn and then you had 4 layers of bulky yarn around your head, I think your head would be sweating no matter how cold it was. If you live somewhere where it's like minus 25 degrees Celsius, then maybe you might want to use some bulky yarn for this, but otherwise I would probably stick to like a DK or fingering, and then it just makes it quite nice and drapey as well and kind of fits a bit better. So yeah, big thumbs up for the Musselburgh. It is a great pattern, as I'm sure you already know, because everyone is obsessed for good reason. Now let's get into some whips. To be honest, I've been mainly working on my Rosie, so I haven't made a heap of progress on some of my other whips. I do have quite a few whips floating around, but I thought I would just talk about my Maggie cardigan because I have made quite a bit of progress on it, and I've kind of figured out what I'm going to do. So a recap for anyone who doesn't know, I had a cardigan that was my favourite cardigan. It was just from a store, and I ripped a massive hole in it because I put it in the washing machine and it felted, and then it was too small, and then when I tried to put it on, it felted and I had a massive hole in it, and I was really sad. And then I was browsing a random yarn store one day and I saw they had Cardiff cashmere in exactly the same colour as the cardigan that I broke, and so I decided to knit myself a Maggie cardigan. This is on Sportweight. Cardiff cashmere says DK, but it's actually a Sportweight, I think. So this is being knit on very, very small needles, 3.5mm needles. So it's taking me quite a long time, and because it's a cardigan, it is knit flat. But I've actually decided, even though this is my first cardigan that I've ever made, I've decided I want to make a few modifications because I want it to be as close as possible to my cardigan that I broke. And the Maggie cardigan pattern just has ribbing, like a ribbed neckband and ribbing at the bottom and on the sleeves, which is fine, but that's not what my cardigan has that I broke. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and do this kind of like folded edge on the hem and the sleeves, and then I think for the button band I'm going to try and do a double knit button band, which I've never even done a button band before, so it's probably biting off more than I can chew. So this is the cardigan that I broke. As you can see, it has lovely gold buttons, and as you can see, it's exactly the same colour as this, which I am obsessed with. But this cardigan, oh, here's the hole, just in case you haven't seen this before. The reason I like this cardigan is it is just very, very simple. It doesn't have ribbing, it just has kind of a folded over hem everywhere, and I really like the look of that. So I'm basically just going to copy that, and how I'm going to do that is I have bought the Super Basic Tee by Oh What a Knit. I've already bought that pattern because I'm going to be knitting it soon with some yarn that is back here. That is like quite coming up soon in my queue. But that pattern has this folded over edge. It's knit on quite fine needles, but it folds over in quite a smart way that it makes it kind of feel like almost like a shop bought thing. Like a lot of edges of clothes that you buy have that folded over edge instead of ribbing, which obviously most knitted garments has ribbing on the edge, but I kind of want to try and do the folded over edge. So that is my plan. I'm going to kind of, because the Oh What a Knit pattern is knitted on the same size needles, I'm just going to follow exactly what it says for that, but do it on my cardigan and see if that works. I don't know if it's going to work. If it doesn't work, I'll just undo it and follow the pattern as it says, but I kind of want to give it a go because the whole point of this is to try and replicate this cardigan as much as possible. So I'm going to try and do that. And I want this to be a cardigan that I wear when I'm going out, and so I want it to kind of just be mainly almost wearing it as like a sweater. Like it's always going to be buttoned up probably. Obviously you can wear it open as well if you want more of a casual look. I feel like having it buttoned up just is more like a going out cardigan kind of thing. So that's my plan, and that is why I want to do a double knit button band, because I do feel like sometimes, and I've been looking at the projects on Ravelry, I do feel like sometimes having just rib for the button band, it can like kind of gape open a bit, and I actually have a cardigan that is got a rib, just a plain like single layer rib button band, and over time it has stretched out quite a lot because of the pressure that is being put on like when it's buttoned up, and because it's quite a tight cardigan, I have a fear that that's going to happen. So that's another reason why I'm going to brave the double knit button band. I've been looking up quite a lot of tutorials. I found a really, really good one that kind of made it click with me. I'll link it down below if you're interested. But it was just a really good tutorial, and I was like, okay, I think I understand this now, because I obviously have done with like a tubular cast off, I have done like the setup rows for double knitting, so I kind of understand the concept of double knitting. I've never done a full-on double knitting thing, but I feel like maybe I can try. I mean, I'm gonna try. I know that it can be tricky with the pickup rate, and sometimes it can be a little bit too tight, a little bit too loose, and it kind of sometimes will take a bit of time to get the right pickup rate along the button band, so it will be a bit of trial and error. But this cardigan has taken me so long. I've been knitting it since May, so I don't care if this cardigan is going to take me a whole year to make at this point. This is like the slowest project I've ever done, so I'm fine if it takes me ages and I have to redo the button band. I'll just do it. You're probably sick of hearing me talk about it because I've talked about it probably on every podcast since I've started knitting it, but we're getting there. I have nearly finished the sleeve. I just need to do the scary part where I'm sort of trying something new. I don't have any new acquisitions because I've been on a yarn buying ban, but I realised that I never spoke about these two yarns that I bought, because I want to try and knit socks. I have never knit socks before. I don't know why in my head they seem scarier than knitting a jumper, which I'm sure most of you out there probably, I feel like knitting socks is like something you would try before knitting a jumper, but for me, the first thing I ever knitted was the Step by Step sweater, which was a jumper. So for me, knitting a jumper seems easier, I think because it's like bigger, so you don't have to do the fiddly bits with tiny needles and stuff. For me, knitting a sock has been like this kind of block in my brain. I don't know why. So yeah, I got the Lang Yarns Superwash, and it's 75% wool and 25% nylon. So yeah, I love these colours. I feel like this is actually kind of giving my Rosie sweater as well. I would like to do some kind of colour work maybe, or maybe just stripes, or I don't know, something. So if any of you are sock knitters and have ideas of what I could do with this, and yes, I'm very aware that I have a colour scheme clearly that I like to stick to. No, this is just my autumn. I don't know, I'm just really into brown at the moment. I think it's just the autumnness of everything. So yeah, if any of you have any ideas of what I could knit with this, let me know. I want to knit a sock, but I'm kind of scared. But anyway, I'm sure it'll be fine. Give me motivation and confidence in the comments. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching. It's been really nice to sit down and share my knitting with you. Let me know in the comments what you are knitting and if there's anything you'd like to see from me. I have been struggling to fit filming knitting podcasts in a bit lately, so I think I'm going to go down to a schedule of one regular knitting podcast a month and then one kind of other video a month, like maybe a pattern roundup video or whatever other thing I kind of like to do. So I thought I'd just say that so that you guys aren't sort of sitting around thinking, where's the video? Because I was posting weekly, but I think I'm going to go down to every 2 weeks just so that I can maintain my sustainable YouTube posting schedule without going crazy. So yeah, and also I feel like if you do a knitting podcast every week, you're not going to have anything new to talk about, so you kind of have to pace them out a little bit. Thank you so much for watching. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!